This is David Whitaker with GEA, and I would like to welcome you to the webinar 2016 HR Certification Program. We're fortunate to have Pete Tosh as our speaker. Pete has founded the Focus Group, a management consulting and training firm that assists organizations in sustaining profitable growth by implementing strategic HR management initiatives, maximizing leadership effectiveness, and strategic planning. Pete's clients include Exxon, Brinks, EMC, State Farm, Marriott, Freddie Mac, Bluebird, and YKK. Prior to founding the Focus Group 20 years ago, Pete had 20 years of HR experience in plant, division, and corporate positions. He develops and facilitates management development workshops for the American Management Association, including the fundamentals of HR management, recruiting, interviewing and selection, talent management, strategic HR management, and HR metrics. Pete is co-author of Leading Organization to the Next Level and holds a BA degree in psychology and a master's degree in both business administration and industrial psychology. Before we turn it over to Pete, he got a couple of housekeeping issues to run by you. The lines are muted due to the large number of people on the call, but you can type in a question and Pete will answer it at the end of the webinar. Also, I can unmute individual lines if you have a question and if you've entered your audio PIN number. Pete, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, David, and let me say good afternoon, and appreciate you guys participating in this webinar to roll out and introduce the 2016 HR Certification Series. As you know, I hope your HR function is vital to organizations and becoming even more important on a daily basis, and so these workshops are designed to introduce many HR best practices in 6 core HR disciplines and also provide you an employment law overview. So as David said, as you have questions during the workshop, just submit them to him and we'll leave some time at the end and I'll try to address them as best I can. Also, don't hesitate to contact David or me after the workshop with any or the webinar with any questions you have. My contact's on the first slide as well as the last slide. Also, if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint, just send me an email. I'll be glad to send that to you. So there's a lot to cover, so let me jump right into it today. So what I want to do is give you an overview of the workshops, talk a little bit about who should attend, the benefits, cost structure, certification, some additional benefits, the facilitation approach that we'll use, give you a summary of the workshops themselves, talk about how to register, and then we'll address your questions. So again, we've got a lot to cover in half an hour. These are the titles for the 7 workshops. So strategic interview and selection, designing a wage and salary administration program, which we find that many times HR professionals just don't have had an opportunity to learn how to do that. Then one of the Constangy attorneys will give you an overview of employment law. Then we'll come back and address the strategic approach to HR and a way to help you design an HR strategic plan that supports your business plan. We'll talk about some techniques for effective training, facilitation, enhancing your facilitation skills. Then performance management to include appraisals, coaching, counseling, and then how to utilize HR metrics. Metrics are a huge opportunity, both to show your value, what you're accomplishing in HR, and also identify some opportunities for improvement that your department might have. So in terms of who we think would benefit from this, it would be certainly HR professionals relatively new to the field and just interested in a comprehensive overview of 6 core HR disciplines, and some experienced HR professionals that just might want to pick up some best practices. So we'll talk about those best practices used by organizations like GE, Ritz-Carlton, Disney. As you may know, Disney has superior HR processes. I spent a week at Disney just benchmarking those. And you might want to bring along some of your line managers. They may very well be interested in benefit from the interviewing, wage salary administration workshop, or the performance appraisal workshop. So you are, as HR professionals, expected to deliver outcomes and that are supportive of what your organization is trying to accomplish. So we in HR are very much in a service role. I mean, we don't manufacture anything. So these workshops will, again, introduce many best practices, allow you to interact and share and learn from other HR professionals. And as I try to do in my workshops, we'll place an emphasis on and try to assist you in developing an action plan that you can take back and put in place. Because many of these, in these workshops, you'll be hopefully developing your own skills, and also you'll be seeing processes and methodologies that you can take back and introduce to some of your line managers. In terms of cost, we have them here, pricing per workshop, as well as some discounts for 4 or more workshops. These numbers are very reasonable. As David mentioned, I facilitate workshops regularly for the American Management Association. I've done that for years, and their prices are significantly more than these. So David has pared these prices down about as low as you can get them. So very reasonable. And also, David and Sherry Carr went to a lot of work, and they've gotten approval both for the new SHRM as well as the original HRCI certification credit. So by attending, participating, you will receive credit on both of those certification processes. A couple of additional benefits and things we're doing with this series. One is for anyone who participates and is interested, we'll have a personal coaching session. So I'll spend some time with you either at the end of the workshop or lunch break, or even follow up with a phone call to help you address a particular challenge you might be having. We're asking participants to submit their questions in advance. I welcome those, and any that we get will be addressed during the workshops. If you register for at least 4, then you can attend the Employment Law Essentials Workshop Overview free. And also there'll be a recognition event, luncheon event for the participants who earn certification. In terms of the facilitation training approach that we'll be using, again, I have been trained in and rely on the AMA approach, which is an active, accelerated adult learning series of techniques, methodologies. So we'll be using those. AMA stays on top of current approaches in training. The PowerPoint, all the slides will be in the participants' notebooks, and those notebooks, of course, will be used during the workshop as well as you can take it back and use them afterwards. There'll be multiple exercises allowing the participants to adjust and adapt the practices to their particular organizational needs. Those will be individual, team, large group. Lots of class discussions so you can learn from and share with other participants. And then we will try to help you develop a follow-through action plan. That's the most important part of the training program, as far as I'm concerned, is what you can take back and use on the job. And also, don't have on the slide here, but we'll enjoy ourselves while we're doing this. Let me then kind of give you a quick summary of the contents of each of the workshops. In the first, strategic interview and selection, and that's going to occur this Friday. So we have some registrants for it right now. It's not too late to get into it, into this workshop. It's a very important one. Interviewing and selection impacts everything else that we do in HR. It's what I call the huge first step. It's a critical process that organizations should stress. Unfortunately, though, we find that many managers are not very effective as interviewers because maybe they haven't been trained. And so we'll give you the skills and a proven step-by-step process and approach that you could use yourself, and also you can take back and introduce to your management team, so your supervisors and managers. So this is a very important one, and love to see you there this Friday. In this workshop, we'll talk about how this process is so important. We'll talk about the key steps in preparing for an interview, knowing the required competencies, what to look for in applications, resumes, how to use kick-out factors and other phone screening techniques. We'll talk about structuring effective questions. We'll show you how to use 5 different types of questions. We'll place particular emphasis on the behavioral interviewing approach, help you learn what that's about, how to develop those questions. And we'll also talk about how to handle those difficult applicants that we run into from time to time, those that are extremely quiet, or the opposite, overly talkative, or those very assertive applicants that sometimes we see. We'll also talk about kind of team interviewing, how to take notes during the interview, and a little bit about avoiding discrimination charges. And I also have a full interviewing format guide checklist that will be in the notebook. The second workshop is the enhancing or designing a wage and salary administration program. So this will show you a methodology for creating wage and salary administration plan, or redesigning the one if you have one now, and how to implement the steps necessary for either creating or redesigning a plan. So here we'll talk about then the objectives, making sure you understand the behaviors you're trying to drive, as well as the performance outcomes that the organization wants driven by this plan, how to establish external equity, how to create a wage salary administration plan that allows you to compensate employees for their performance and for achievements. We'll talk a little bit about developing policies and procedures to support the comp plan program. Utilizing multiple forms of communication so employees understand and buy into the compensation plan. We see that often this is a huge opportunity for organizations. Employees don't fully trust the plan because, in large part, many times they don't understand it. And then we'll talk about training supervisors and managers in their role in supporting the plan. And then in July, one of the Constangy attorneys, as I mentioned, will be giving you an employment law update. So that they'll be talking to you about the new overtime regulations, discrimination, harassment, all that's going on with the LGBT community and employees. That's all over the news now, with North Carolina suing the federal government suing North Carolina just yesterday, I believe. How to avoid issues with social media and communication policies. Avoiding those ambushing elections, since the NLRB passed regulations that essentially speed up that process so much and give advantage to labor unions. And then just generally the employment laws that both state, federal, and local, that impact every organization regardless of its size. The fourth module then is the strategic piece here. So We'll be talking about then delivering that quality service since we are in that service role. We'll talk about how you can be an even more essential, valuable, value-producing member of your leadership team, and then a methodology for creating an HR strategic plan. So we'll be looking at ways to align your HR processes with your business plan, utilizing that strategic frame of reference, which is a pretty easy to understand methodology for creating an HR strategic plan. Kind of the challenges in delivering internal service that we have, and those aspects of internal service that our internal customers feel are most important and most desired. There's been some good research on that, and so that's very helpful to see what those 5 priorities are to our internal customers. Then we'll give you a little model that is a gaps model for helping close any service gaps that you might have. And then we'll talk about your role as both a coach and a counselor, your coach and counselor to your HR teams, your managers, supervisors, frontline employees. And we'll talk about the difference between the two, when and how to coach and when and how to counsel. Workshop 5, we'll talk about then training and facilitation techniques, and we'll look at the multiple elements that need to be addressed in order to have a successful training event. A few years ago, a client asked me to come up with a list of all the things that need to be addressed before a training event to make it successful, and I couldn't believe the extensiveness of the list after we put it all together. And then we'll talk a lot about some adult learning, what facilitates adult learners and how they learn. So some of the specific modules will be why training programs aren't as effective as they might be and how to avoid those pitfalls. And the research shows that many times we spend a lot of money on training in almost all organizations, but we really don't get as good a return on those dollars as we should. So we'll be talking about how to make improvements there. We'll talk about the maximizing effectiveness of the 3 players, and so obviously there are participants in any training program, there's a facilitator, and then there's a manager of those participants. And it may shock you, but the research shows that manager is the most important of those 3 players, and we'll talk about why and what that means for us as trainers. We'll talk about the training cycle from you, first of all, determining whether you even have a training issue or not, all the way through implementing and then follow up on that plan. Preparation steps, multiple adult learning, best practice facilitation techniques, and then adjusting to the fact that adults learn in different ways, and so we have to adjust our training, our visuals, our training aids, etc., to accommodate all those different needs, and then wrapping up with how do we measure those results, kind of closing that loop. How do we know whether we've met our initial objectives with the training? In Module 6, we'll talk about performance management, how to improve an existing appraisal process that you might have in place, and or how to implement a new program, and then I'll talk more about coaching, counsel, and appraisal-related skills. This is an issue that's always been intriguing because I don't know of any organization that's totally satisfied with their performance management program. So lots of opportunities then to kind of tweak them. So we'll talk about the why have performance management, the payback. There's been a lot of good research showing a huge payback. We'll talk about implementing or modifying what you have right now using critical success factors and core competencies. We'll talk about the huge impact that every manager's style has on employee behavior and how managers can more effectively guide employees to maximize their potential through ongoing coaching and counseling, how to prepare for appraisal, best practices for conducting those, and then what do we do with that unsatisfactory performer and address that person while we minimize our legal exposure or risk. Then the last module will be the HR metrics. We'll talk about the advantages to you as HR professionals for having metrics, as well as advantages to the organization. How do you determine what you should measure? And then we'll look at multiple metrics to use. And truly, we can measure anything that is done in HR, and we'll look at 5 different categories of metrics. So here we'll talk about the benefits. How do we know what to measure? What are these 5 categories or types of metrics that are available to us? And then we will introduce some sample metrics that you could take back and utilize to gauge the proficiency of any of your HR processes, particularly recruiting, comp, benefits, training, and employee retention. And then we'll close with a kind of a wrap-up of how to go about implementing HR metrics dashboard. So very quickly then, those are the 7 workshops. The 6 will be addressing the 6 core HR functions, both tactical as well as strategic, plus the employment law update in July. In terms of how you can go about registering, if I can get that slide up, there we go. You can register online at the GEA site, download there a PDF file and fax that into GEA, or you can call and pay by credit card. So 3 options available to you. And so David encouraged you, and I mentioned too, I think, that we'd like you to forward any questions into David that you might have. Again, I cover the material real fast. We've got about 5 minutes left. So David, did we get any questions?
Yeah, we got a couple. Well, actually 3. How will these workshops help me advance my career in human resources?
That's a good question. I think each of the workshops, as I mentioned, they're designed to address the 6 core functions of HR. Some are strategic, like strategic business partner, and some are more tactical, like metrics, wage and salary administration, recruiting, interviewing, and selection. So if you're in HR very long, you're going to have some responsibility for all of these functions, and we're going to try to give you some methodologies and processes and best practices used by the better managed HR functions across America, addressing each of those 6 core functions.
Did I understand you to say that you teach, these are similar workshops for the AMA?
That's right. I conduct a number for AMA, both in the HR area, like fundamentals of human resource management, interview and selection, performance management we've done over the years, some training workshops, strategic HR. And then I borrowed some from some of the, also facilitate strategic workshops for AMA. Got a couple coming up next week and week after. So when we get to the HR being seen as a strategic business partner, we'll utilize some of the AMA processes to help us be more strategic as leaders as well.
Mm-hmm. And how can I get a copy of the PowerPoint? Would you refresh my memory?
There is my email right there, pete.tosh@thefocusgroup.biz. to shoot me an email. Be glad to send that to you. As I mentioned, if you do have other questions anytime during the year, right after this or before you sign up for one of the workshops, don't hesitate to call David or me. We'll be glad to kind of answer your questions about either the approach that's going to be used or the content, so that you make sure that you spend your time in a way that is you get maximum payback and it's worthwhile to you.
And as you said, we can still register. They can still register for the workshop on Friday.
Absolutely. We've got folks coming, and as I mentioned, I call that recruiting and selection process is the first big step. I feel very strongly that if we're not effective there, and we don't get into the organization employees who will do the job and who fit within the organization, then many of the other things that we do in HR really don't have the positive impact. So the wrong employee, even from a skill set or attitudinal perspective in an organization, doesn't that the impact of performance appraisal and wage and salary administration and training and orientation and communication, those things just don't have the impact that they do have on employees who are properly selected. So I can't overemphasize the importance of that whole process. And so in this workshop on Friday, then we'll talk about the topics that I referenced, but particularly we will give you a methodology that's proven to be effective. We'll talk about the behavioral interviewing approach, and I think you can take away the techniques and use yourself, augment maybe what you're doing right now, and also take that back and maybe introduce some of those techniques to your supervisory managerial team, because the research shows that generally speaking, our supervisors and managers just kind of learn interviewing by doing. So they're asked to do it, they do it. Asked to do it again, they do it the same way. Asked to do it again, they do it the same way again. And pretty much after a while, they feel like they're experienced interviewers, but maybe not as effective as it could be.
I think we've already answered this question. Well, I know we have. I was in a meeting. Can someone send me information from the PowerPoint? So we've already answered that question. How about how to get the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we'll send the PowerPoint out to everybody who requested.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't see any hands raised virtually. I can, if you have a question that you want to verbalize, I can unmute your line and let you talk directly to Pete. Pete, I don't see any more questions, so I guess we'll close out. It's almost 2:30.
Okay.
Good job as usual. If you have any questions, please feel free to call, get in touch with Pete or me, either one. We hopefully we'll see you Friday at 577 Mulberry Street, 16th floor, Cherry Blossom Suite. Hope y'all have a good afternoon.
Thanks for participating. Thank you, David.
Thank you.